My guest this morning is Deirdra R. Moore-Janvier, Esquire. As an African-American mother, wife, and advocate for social change, Deidra, by using her voice, identify purpose and lived experiences, finds herself on a mission to educate as many of our youth as possible about the value of investing in themselves and learning about their history. I know that's right. Deidra reminds our youth, especially our black and brown children, that our ancestors worked hard and brilliantly at paving the way so that we could work hard and diligently pay it forward. She does not let us forget about the men and women who fought for our rights and liberties as they sacrificed their lives so that we could be free. Free physically, free mentally, and free emotionally. In 1996, as a single mom and after 9 years of full-time employment with TIAA-CREF, a Manhattan-based company, Deidra quit her job as a commercial real estate paralegal to attend law school. In 1999, after graduating City University of New York School of Law, Deidra worked as a public defender with the Legal Aid Society in Bronx County. In 2004, nearly 5 years later, Deidra left the Legal Aid Society to establish her own firm, the law offices of Deidra R. Moore, PC. Deidra advises and litigates on all aspects of matrimonial law, all right now, guardianship matters, trusts and estate law, elder law, and wrongful death suits or cases. After 20 years of being a practicing attorney, Deidra's career pivoted to becoming a published author. In 2022, she authored her first book, From Me to You, The Power of Storytelling and Its Inherent Generational Wealth, an African-American Story. If you are not willing to learn, no one can help you. If you are determined to learn, no one can stop you. That's the quote in the bio by Zig Ziglar. Ladies and gentlemen, I am thrilled and I am excited to welcome to the Reading Circle microphones none other than Deidra R. Moore-Janvier, Esquire. Deidra, good morning.
Good morning, Mark. How are you?
I am wonderful. I am well. All is well, especially after that couple of minutes that we chatted a couple of minutes ago, because I know we're going to have some fun.
Yeah. You got me up.
So now, this is the thing. Like I told you, audience, we keep it real on this show, and I'm very transparent. But Deidra and I talked about a month ago, maybe it might even be close to 2 months ago now, because Deidra was introduced to me by my good friend Pam Perry. And so Deidra and I originally set one date, and then we had to reschedule to this date. But this was, God's providence, because for surely it is a wonderful weekend to talk about what we're going to talk about, because it is the 60th anniversary of the March on Washington, which is Monday. And one of Deidra's books is Leaders of the Civil Rights Movement, a brief introduction featuring phenomenal people with phenomenal stories. That's one of the books. And we just talked about the one in the bio in terms of From Me to You, The Power of Storytelling and Its Inherent Generational Wealth, an African-American Story. And then she has a coloring and activity book that goes with the Civil Rights Movement. But we're going to get to those. But before we even get there, Deidra, one of the first questions I do ask is kind of, where did this all start? I'm going to take you all the way back to like elementary school, high school, college, so forth. Kind of like, where did your lens come from? Were you always kind of like this advocate for folks who look like you, who look like me, who've been downtrodden, marginalized? I mean, where did the whole thing come from?
Wow, Mark, thank you so much for having me on this segment. I so appreciate you, okay? First and foremost.
Thank you.
Okay. So to answer your question, Mark, I was born on January 15th, which is the official birthday of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., okay? And I say that because growing up, all I had outside of my grandmother, my maternal grandmother who raised me, I had with respect to, encouraging me and supporting me emotionally, I had Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., right? And all that he brought to the table with him. In school, second grade, all they start teaching you is about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., right? And some of the other folks that had lived experiences during his time. But I'll say this, it was growing up in my late maternal grandmother's household where I often heard her say this quote, in order to know where you're going, you must know where you come from.
Correct.
Now, it's as an adult, Mark, that I truly learned to appreciate the significance of those words. Because to me, those words meant identifying your culture and learning your history, right? And through that journey, our children can develop a strong belief in their intrinsic worth shaped by the values instilled in them today. So those beliefs and values were derived not only from my family, but also from my ancestral culture, right? Beliefs and values which hold immense potential for shaping my character, right? And let me just say this, Mark. My mission was to teach younger generations, like you said, about the value of investing in themselves and in learning their history, reminding them that learning where you come from is the path toward learning who you will be. And I say it that way because that's the essence of who I am. And I don't know where it really came from other than being in the environment where, I have to say this, where racism manifests itself and how it affects and impacted the poor communities in which I grew up in. And I think I was trying to find my way out, so to speak. And so there's not one thing that I can pinpoint to as to how I got here. I'm just grateful to be here. And I'm grateful to be able to have a voice, to use my voice, to speak on behalf of those who are voiceless for whatever reasons. And I'll just stop right there for now.
No, that's because we're going to rock and we're going to roll. And you're absolutely right in terms of having a voice and using the voice, especially when we get to the point where we have platforms. That's one of the reasons why I've loved, like this is my 23rd season now. I just celebrated 22 years on the air. I've always loved the fact and been grateful for the fact that I have a platform that I can get word out. In other words, for those who have a voice and who are willing to say it, and as they say, TI is, I've had the opportunity to have a platform to get that out there like that. And then for those who don't rise early and listen now live, I put it on my YouTube channel so they can always go back and listen to it at another time. So yes, getting the word out there. And for those of us who do have the venues or the opportunities or the platforms or the avenues or whatever you want to call it, to get out to the masses, then it is incumbent upon us to do just that. That's why I'm glad Pam linked us together, because
Same here.
Certainly.
Let me just say one other thing.
Sure, go right on.
I have this quote that I oftentimes share with people. I say that as a child, I didn't have a voice. As a young adult, I learned to grow into my voice. And now at being 50 plus years old, I learned to listen to my voice and to trust it wholeheartedly. Okay? So it's so crucial that we learn to not stifle, oppress, or suppress our inner voices, because the messages are all there as to how to give us direction and guidance, leading us towards whatever it is we want to do. Trust and believe, it's there.
No, absolutely right. And you know what? I can honestly and truly, I've said it on the air before, and I'll say it to anybody, look, I really don't care. Because see, this is the thing. You're going to find this too if you haven't already found it. The older you get, the less filter you have, the less you really care. I mean, it's and that does not necessarily, and I always tell people all the time when I make that statement, that don't mean I want to be rude and nasty and all that. But it does mean I'm going to speak my truth. I'm going to speak truth as I see it. Now, you can agree or disagree, but I'm not going to not say it because I'm afraid of offending you.
I am with you 100%, and I'll stand in it all day long. Unapologetically.
Unapologetically, because there was a time, in my younger years where there were things I may or may not have said or things I may or may not have done because I was, I didn't want to offend anybody. But at this point, it's like, well, how is, you're not worrying about offending me, so why should I be so concerned about not offending you? That's what I was going earlier whenever, we were on the phone, and I just said it a couple of minutes before you called in, and we'll go there. We won't go there yet, but it'll probably rile you back up. But it's like, we're going to sit here, you just said about, us knowing our history, which I could not agree with more. I mean, when I'm not doing radio, my day job, as they say, is a school principal. And so I work with kids all the time. And I tell them all the time, I am convinced that if you all knew your history, there would be some things you would not do, some things you would not say. Because if you understood your history, you just would not, your conscience couldn't allow you to do that if you understood your history. So the fact that I see you doing that, the fact that I hear you saying that, lets me know you don't understand history.
And not only that, Mark, but your beliefs and values will be in alignment with what your choices will be. You understand? And then another part of it, going to what you just said, there's a lot of our young kids running around here trying to navigate themselves in our imperfect nation here in America, but they're trying to do it without a sense of identity or self-worth, knowing who they are, what their life is worth. They're navigating themselves in a way almost blindly. And I'm hoping that my book, and I our book, From Me to You, will be another tool to help, another resource that would help them to educate themselves about our history so that, again, their beliefs and values that we all have, okay, are in alignment with the choices that we make today. Notwithstanding what others are trying to do, it's about educating you about your history, your culture, okay? Go ahead.
No, it is. And see, the only reason I am saying it this way is because I'm on the radio, because if I were live, and I might say it this way even on the radio, the only reason I'm putting it as they call it, they try to nicely put it, quote, unquote, the N-word. The only reason I'm saying it that way is because I'm on the air. But my boys know in my school, because I run an all-boys school, I lead an all-boys school. It's a leadership school. It's not an alternative school. It's not gifted and talented, but it is a leadership school. And they know. As a matter of fact, any school I've been in, I better not hear the word "in" come out of their mouth. And because they know, like I have a son, they know if I happen to walk by and hear them, I say the word "who" really loud. And so it's almost like a running joke now in my students because they've picked up on it, which I was flattered, because even now what happens if they hear one of their classmates say, I hear one of them go "who" really loud, just like I do. But I have them understand. Do you understand? I don't care how you spell it, because, you know, I'm not against hip hop. I'm a hip hop fan. But shame on our artists who constantly glorify the word. And so I can tell the kids, I don't care how you spell it, whether it's Nigga, Niggah, Nigger, Nig. I don't care how you spell it. It's not cute. All right? Because you need to understand that when we were being called that, we were less than a human. Now, I don't know constitutionally, and you're a lawyer, so you know, I don't know how you get 3/5 of a man. I don't understand what that is. Either you're a 5/5 of a man, or you're not.
You know what? You said a couple of things. And the first thing I want to respond to is when you hear your students say the N-word in whatever form they use, right? And then you stop and you hold them accountable for not why they shouldn't use it, essentially, right? So it's funny. The other day I was in my den and my son was in his room, playing with his peers on video games, whatever. So I hear one of them say something about black ass. Right? Excuse me. I hope that's not inappropriate to say.
That was in context.
Then I said, I don't know who that is and what context in which they're referencing or using that phrase, but it's wholly inappropriate. I said, so let's just stop it right here and let's use our intelligence that you all have and your ability to articulate yourself to use the proper form in speaking to each other. There's absolutely no reason why we need to speak to each other in any type of disrespectful way. Okay, and I wanted the other kids to hear me. So
no, you're absolutely right. Because that's, to be honest with you, Deidra, that's the only way. Because there are so many. See, because this is what I know also. That's what my boys, my kids, my students, my scholars, that's what they hear at home. So it's like this disconnect between what my teachers and my principal is telling me versus what my parents are telling me. So the more that more parents do that, the better off we are all going to be, because we will be in sync. And
it's not a term of endearment. It's not.
Right.
It's nothing other than what it is on its face. And it shouldn't be used in any form.
Correct.
That's my thought.
No, that's true. That's me and you together.
But understand this. Our kids are going to go out into the world. They're going to be around their peers. They're going to be around others who are able to use it, say it, reference it. But all I can do with our son is to encourage him to not bring it home, not to say it in our presence, and not to say it at all, if at all possible. You understand?
I do.
I know it's possible to not say it. Just remember what your parents told you. It's not a term of endearment, and it's not appropriate in any form. You know, and so.
No, absolutely. Because, see, again, the hope would be that, yes, they will be around their peers. But like I said, for me, and it is flattering to, you know, and it's funny, it's comical in a sense, because they started mimicking me, because I mean, literally, you could hear me say "who" like around the building. Once I happen to walk across and I hear it, I will yell "who" so loud, and that catches their attention.
I'm going to do that.
And that captures their attention. So when I started seeing them mimic me when one of their classmates or their classmates would start doing it, like, okay, now you're beginning to hold each other accountable. I don't have to hold you accountable. So once they get educated, now they can start holding their peers account. Like, yo, man, you might not want to use that because, whenever that term was being put on us, we were less than a pig. We were less than a hog, so that opens up dialogue for them to help them because they may not know. They're not being taught at home. I get that. But I'll tell my kids, take it back home. Take it back to your parents. Say, you know what, my principal, Mr. Medley, said we're not going to say that, and here's why. Now, I'm not telling you your parents are going to stop, but at least you will have educated them.
Right, absolutely. I agree 100%.
I mean, it's like over the summers, I have sat on the porch and listened to people walk up and down the street. And the kids get it because, I could be like the Eddie Murphy or Richard Pryor or somebody. I mean, they really think I'm a comedy act whenever I do this. When I do this little spiel, they just laugh, but they get the message. I said, I'll sit on my porch and I'll hear folks talking about that nigga. Oh, man, you should have seen that. Oh, that nigga. Oh, that's my nigga. Like, who is that? I want to know who it is. I want to know who that is. And you'll have to fill in the blank, but you have to hear folks the way that's all they reference. Oh, you should have seen it. Oh, that's my, So the kids get a kick out of when I do because they know I'm true. Secondly, they've heard it themselves and they know, and the way I do it is comical, but they get the point. I was like, who is that? Because that's all I hear about. I never hear a name. I never hear them say whoever the name is, always that.
Yeah, I'm with 100%.
So it's like we were talking on the phone, and in terms of now the erasing, because we're talking about educating here. That's what we're talking. We're talking about educating our children. And yet we have a certain part of the population who is now saying, well, we don't want that education because it may traumatize our children. And I touched on this prior to you coming on the air. But just the thought of that burns me because it's like, well, how is it when the actual events that were truly traumatizing were happening? That was not a consideration. But yet you're worried about your kids being traumatized because they're reading about it, hearing about it, or watching a film about it. So that just does not make sense to me. And when we were talking earlier, you were talking about the difference between indoctrination and education. So we could stay here the rest of the day on that. But you know what? You were saying some good stuff there when we were on the phone, the difference between indoctrination and education.
You know what? We're not going to stay in that for too long because I don't believe in giving life to that which is obvious. I believe putting my energy towards trying to find a solution and getting around it, okay? So to me, if you want to really know what indoctrination is truly about, just simply look at the history of the enslaved Africans or African-American history here in our imperfect nation. You understand? They told people what to think. They told people how to think. They told people they didn't allow people to think critically. No one can have an independent, reasoning thing going on when they were being indoctrinated about the enslaved Africans here in America, right? But education is simply about allowing kids to think critically, allowing them to invoke independent reasoning, and coming up with their own opinions. Okay, and that's the clear distinction between the two. So we know what indoctrination looks like because it's been happening upon us as a people for so long, right? But, I'm into educating wherever I can, and I'm hoping that my book, From Me to You, will be used as a source or a tool to help educate more and more people about the history of, I like to say the who, what, when, where, how, and why of that concept. Right. So go ahead.
No, absolutely right, and we're gonna continue and talking about the book because we're working our way there and we're actually interweaving them within the conversation. But listening audience, I hope you've been with me since 6, but I definitely hope you've been with me since 7 because my guest joined me, and my guest is Deirdra R. Moore-Janvier, Esquire. When I was reading your bio, I see you actually started in corporate at TIAA-CREF, CREF. And then you converted to go to law school. Now, I did a very similar path in terms of my first part of my work career was in corporate America, and then I changed over to education. What made the shift for you to move from the real estate and TIAA-CREF to go to law school?
When I arrived at TIAA-CREF, I arrived there because I was on a quest to figure out for myself, how do you become a lawyer, or better yet, how do you become a judge? Because that's truly what I wanted to be when I was younger. I felt myself wanting to be a judge And I didn't know what the process entailed. I didn't have lawyers and judges in our family. I didn't have lawyers and judges in my neighborhood. And I certainly didn't have lawyers and judges that came into our schools to talk about the process of becoming those things. So over time, when I turned 18 in particular, I remember it clearly. I went to Norman Thomas High School down in Manhattan. And when you turn 18, they had some people come in to talk to you about the importance of registering to vote, right, when you turn 18. And it's from that point forward, somehow, that I went on this mission of, you know what, I'm going to really look into how do you become a lawyer. So then I did jury duty at the age of, I think, 22. And after serving as the foreperson on 2 separate occasions, that really reinforced my desire to want to become a lawyer and or a judge at some point. And I say that to say that's when I found a job in the legal department of TIAA-CREF. And I started off as an executive secretary turned commercial real estate paralegal. And after 9 years of working there, I said, you know, I do a lot and I contribute to the process of what the attorneys do, but I can't sign my name on anything. And I said, it's time to move on. And that's when I decided to quit my job after 9 years to go to law school. And I did it as a single mother to my daughter at the time, all right? And it was difficult. It was challenging. And while in law school, I worked 3 jobs, okay? I traversed Manhattan from the east side to the west side before heading over to Queens to attend law school, okay? And then to return back here to Bronx County, okay? And I cried many nights, Mark, and I'm not going to say it any other way. I cried many nights because it was difficult. It was challenging. Challenging and difficult more so because I didn't have the emotional support, nor did I have the financial support that my other friends were afforded as I attended law school. And that's okay, but, you know, I still pushed through, okay? And so it would be, I went to law school, and my first job was with the Legal Aid Society as a public defender, representing those indigent folks who could not, for whatever reason, afford legal representation. And then after nearly 5 years, I started my own law firm, thank you, Jesus, the law offices of Deirdra Moore, Sean PC, in 2006. And I've been blessed to be able to do what I do, which is to always try to be a part of the solution. That is my only mission of anything, trying to be a part of the solution for folks that come to me for my assistance, okay? And so, it will be 20 years in, and here I am having pivoted in 2022 to become a published author. And here it is in 2023. My next 2 books, as you referenced, will be released. And I just feel blessed to be able to be that voice within our community that speaks to the importance of educating our children about their lineage, and self-worth. So,
well, you know what? I say this oftentimes also. I've never been one to get pinned down to doing just one thing. Now, I'm not mad at folks who can do that, who can stay with just one thing forever. Mm-hmm. That's just not me. So the fact that you can be in corporate and then be an attorney and then become a published author, I'm great with that. I call it, to me, those are like what I call Renaissance people. These are folks that can, do multiple things and don't have to be just limited to just one. And again, I'm not mad at folks who stay with one thing for all their days. We're wired different ways. But for me, I've always had multiple experiences. I loved always having varied and different experience. Got military experience, fraternal experience, religious, fraternal, corporate experience, educational experience. So I always loved doing many things. And
but
so,
you know what, Mark?
Mm-hmm.
Let me say, it's about growing and developing, right?
Right.
Growing and developing and constantly growing and developing. You're going to find yourself naturally pivoting or leveling up out of wherever you are.
No, you're absolutely right. I could not agree with you more.
What traps people is that fear. And I try to point out to people, be afraid, but do it. If it's positive and constructive to you or someone else, be afraid, but go ahead and do it. You understand? And I'd like to say to people, I do what I can, I help where I can, and I keep it moving, Mark.
Right.
You understand?
I could not agree with you more because, you're spot on, because I cannot tell you each time I would make a shift or a change or either add something on, I would always get these people say, why are you doing that? And usually my response is because I want to.
Right.
I mean, I was working for AT&T when I took a leave of absence to go into the Air Force, and folks were looking at me like, wait, you're leaving one of the top corporations in the world to take a leave of absence to go in the military? Yes. Why? Because I want to. Whenever I ultimately left corporate to go into education, I took a 50% pay cut and so forth. People were like, you're leaving, you're this, you're that, and you're leaving to go into education? Yes. Why? Because I want to. Currently, and something you said just really inspired me for whenever the going gets tough on this thing. I'm going to think back to what you just said about, going through law school, so forth and so on, and it was hard, and raising the family, the kids, and so forth and so on, and doing everything, because I just started a doctoral program this summer, and so it's like when the going gets tough in that, I'm going to think about those words that you just said of going through, law school with everything that you had to face. The other thing that I heard you say was, and this is why, and I am going to have to get you to, even if it's on Zoom or on Google or whatever, on screen, that's why I present so many people in front of my students, because I never know when it's going to be that one person or that one experience that they say, that's what I want to be.
Absolutely. It's important because we need to keep showing what it looks like. I just emailed a friend yesterday and I said, look, I'm not trying to impress people. I'm not trying to get attention or any of those things. I'm just simply trying to show our younger generation what it looks like to be whatever it is that you might want to be, or what you may not want to be. You understand?
Yeah, right. No, you're absolutely right. I mean, because you know what it is, especially, and I don't even use the term minority. I don't even, because I'm not minority nothing. I'm not minority anything.
That's right.
I don't use that term. But for our children in the urban areas, our people of color children, our brown and black children, it is so important for them to be exposed, because you have this in your book, From Me to You, the power of storytelling and its inherent generational wealth. It is so important for them to be exposed to people. Before the pandemic, that year 2020, before that March, from that September to that March, I had everything from a chief custodian to an airline pilot to an attorney to a business administrator. Every other day, every week, I had them in front of my students. I would pull them down out of their classroom and say, you're going to come listen to this person and tell their story of what they've done, this, that, and the other. And I wanted them to see them in front of them and to hear them. And, we were cranking until COVID hit, and that stopped us dead in our track. But the brother who was the attorney, you know the whole thing when Epstein allegedly committed suicide? The brother, and you may know him, I don't know, he's from New Jersey, but he was representing one of the correction officers, the female correction officer. In that case, that they were accusing them of not doing their jobs or conspiring or whatever. Well, he was there with us that one day, and then the next day in one of the newspapers, you know how they do the caricature of you all?
Right.
Whenever they do the drawings. Well, the next day he appeared in one of the big newspapers with the artist's rendition drawing, and my boys went crazy. He was just with us yesterday. He was absolutely... But it's so important for them to be exposed to so many things. And the other thing I heard you say was, about in terms of African-American attorneys, African-American judges, I just think it is divine justice. I think it's divine providence. I think it is just poetic justice. The fact that you have Alvin Bragg, Fannie Willis, and Letitia James.
You know what? Like you said before, we need to continue to expose our kids to the varying careers or professions that are out here, where we as folks of color, however you want to classify us, can show what it looks like and explain to them what it takes. But the other point that I want to make to that is, we can't forget that while they see the lawyers, the Alvin Braggs, the Letitia James, or whomever might be in front of them, they have to also know that there's some lived experiences that led up to the position that they're in right now.
Correct.
And it's the transformative power of storytelling, okay, that they're going to know about these lived experiences, hence know about their history or the ancestral cultural, I should say. So I just think it's important that we not only continue to present our folks and other people as well as to what we do and what it looks like, we need to share those stories about how we got here. So
No, that's critical because you did it a couple of minutes ago when you were talking about going to law school. People need to understand the rigors and the rewards. They need to understand both sides of the story because you didn't just get your own attorney firm. That you didn't just plop into that. Nobody put that in your lap. You had to work for that because now that's the other message, particularly for young people. You got to put in the work.
Absolutely. Sacrifice, dedication, and discipline will get it every time. So be willing to do the work.
Be willing, because many of our, and this is going back to your civil rights movement, because a lot of my conversation, particularly on a conversation like this, is based on conversations I've had with students. And many of the students, honestly, because we're constantly trying to help them understand things are not like they are in 2023. They weren't always like this. You weren't always just able to step up in a store and buy the Jordans that you want. You weren't always able to just, sit anywhere you want on the bus. You weren't always even to drink out of the same water fountain. It was not always. So the things that you're taking for granted, folks had to fight, work, and die for in order for you to do this.
I'm so glad you mentioned that because I'm wearing this T-shirt I'm sure you're probably familiar with it, but it's a T-shirt that says fight like Malcolm, speak like Frederick, challenge like Rosa, dream like Martin, think like Garvey, lead like Harriet, build like Madam C.J. Walker, write like Maya, educate like W.E.B. Du Bois, believe like Thurgood Marshall. But I would add to that T-shirt and protest and be of public service like, what is the two gentlemen's name in Tennessee, Justin?
Yes, the two legislators, the ones that they bounced them out. Yes.
I would add them to that list. And I say this because I love this message because it reminds each of our younger generations that, you know what, Mark, they hold the same potential, the same character traits, and the same leadership capabilities that our ancestors held.
Yes.
But they sacrificed their blood, sweat, tears, and lives lost as they made a difference in the world, right? I try to remind our young adults that you have what you need. Those innate capabilities of courage, optimism, resilience, strength, perseverance, determination, and all the other character traits, lean into them. You understand? In order to get from point A to point B, ultimately leading you to whatever it is you want to be or do in life, just remember, you have to be willing to do the work while applying the concepts of sacrifice, dedication, and discipline to whatever it is you want to do or become. So I try to encourage our younger generation by reminding them, I should say, that, you know what, you and your imperfections, I'll say, are truly enough. You don't need to be any more than who you are right now. All I ask is that you learn your history, because in that you're going to come away with having identified your voice, identity, and your purpose in life. And that, again, is going to put you in alignment, your beliefs and values in alignment with what it is you want to do in life, okay? So I'm so glad you mentioned that.
No, and that's the other half of the message is that, we're not, and James Brown kind of says, like, I ain't asking for no, and I'm paraphrasing him, I ain't asking for no handout, just open the door. That's what the kids need to understand. No. We're making a way for you to have the opportunity. You're still going to have to do it. You're not going to be able to just sit on the couch and play video games all day and expect that you're going to be. It's like, I've told this story before, Jen. It's always funny to me because we had, locally, we had a football player, an NFL player that played with the New York Giants. He actually grew up in our area. It was Victor Cruz, whenever Victor played for the Giants. So Victor would come to the schools when there because he was from our school district. And he would talk to the kids. So all of my kids are either going to the NFL or the NBA. When we start talking, that's why I put so many different people in front of them, because that's all they know is NFL, NBA. So Vic comes to the school, and the kid says that, I'm going to the NFL. So now Victor asks him, so, okay, do you play football? No. Do you work out? No. Do you know any NFL players? No. He says, well, how do you expect to get to the NFL? And it's like that, but that's the warped expectation that I'm going to get here without having to put in the work, that I'm just going to magically appear in the NFL.
Well, that's why they need to know these stories. They need to hear from NFL players or NBA players or doctors or lawyers or teachers, whomever, to know what it took to get to where they are. I also point out, if I may, I like to remind folks, and I say this quote every time, that we as a people have not come that far where we can afford to abandon the stories lessons, dreams, sacrifices that were made by our ancestors as they endured the most egregious time of our history, Mark. We owe them so much more. And as you can appreciate, as you know, I should say, our country here in America is divided over the issue of upgrading the curricula in schools, right, Mark? Curriculums that tell the story of how the enslaved Africans and their descendants have been abused and used to create the canvas for what is known as white privilege, right? Curriculums that would share the history of how Black people have consistently been denied opportunities after being exploited so ruthlessly. But guess what? I'm here to remind folks that notwithstanding the agenda of others to keep the history out of school curriculums, parents, leaders, neighbors, radio hosts, radio personalities, family and friends, we have an obligation to tell the story of the enslaved Africans and their descendants and tell it anyway. Because there's inspiration and empowerment in the stories that are to be told about them, and these stories should be told regularly and accurately. So that's a testament to why it's so important that we continue exposing our children to folks of color, however you classify us, in the professions that we're in, and let them hear the stories and experiences of these individuals so that our kids can be inspired and draw down from those lived experiences and say to themselves, oh, I could do that, and now I know how to go about doing it. Okay? So, but anyway.
Absolutely right. I mean, the stories have to be interesting. I heard you mention white privilege, and I have this quote that I say all the time because, white privilege is always denied or always, pretended as if it doesn't exist. But I have this quote that really kind of sums it up. It says, white privilege does not mean your life has not been hard. It means that your skin color is not one of the things making it harder.
Agreed.
So that's where, and because I'm fair, like I said, I also have a quote that says Black people need to do three things: educate our children, create our own jobs, and support our own business, period.
I agree with that as well. However, I think we would benefit, once you get your history down, once you identify your culture and learn your history, Mark, you will be able to navigate any spaces.
Correct.
You'll be able to identify many opportunities and take advantage of them. So, because we have issues within our communities and cultures as well, but it's all a part of that or derived from how racism manifests itself in our poor neighborhoods and beyond poor neighborhoods, in our culture and communities, right? And we have to deal with how that shows up, trying to put food on the table, clothing on our kids' back, a roof over their heads, you know what I'm saying, while dealing with the wealth gap, the income gap, the housing gap, the healthcare gap, the income gap. So we have to deal with all of these things, just trying to survive, right? But, and I don't know, it's just, there's a lot of work to be done. And I'm just glad and grateful to be here to try and do what I can, help where I can, and keep it moving.
And that's what it is in terms of each one teach one. All of us do our part and do what we can, like you said, to keep it moving. The attorney that I was talking about that I had in front of the voice was Jason E. Foy. I don't know you all attorneys. I don't know if you all know each other.
Shout out to Jason Foy in New Jersey.
Yes, that's
and friends.
That was. I think, like I said, it's kind of like that network that you all may or may not know each other. I know, but Jason is who I had in front of the boys. He spoke to the boys, and that next day, like I said, they were in court with this whole Epstein case, and the artist's rendition of him appeared. And like I said, my kids had an absolute fit, and I was thrilled that they did.
Yeah, I think he was he just rolled out of the role as the president of the Bronx County Bar Association, some prestigious role that he was that he held for the last couple of years. I have a lot of respect for Jason Foy, so thank you for mentioning him.
I am not surprised at that at all. And again, that the day that he came to the school, we had a wonderful conversation. If I'm not mistaken, I'm almost sure that we are fraternity brothers. I think if I recall correctly, Jason is an alpha, and I'm an alpha as well. But we are fraternity brothers. But he again had an impact on the student, and they had an opportunity to see somebody who looked like him that was litigating cases. Matter of fact, in terms of that, being a female, because I just told you, I was so proud of Fannie Willis as well as Letitia James, do you find any, because I had about a couple months ago, I had another attorney on, the Kathy Middleton. I don't know if you all know each other either, but
it sounds familiar, but go ahead.
She and story kind of somewhat similar. She ultimately started her own firm also. But one of the questions I did ask her, and I'll ask you as well, what is kind of like the reception whenever you now walk in, or you are the attorney of someone, in terms of, you know, how you perceive? Are they like, when you walk into the courtroom, are they not realizing that you're the attorney, or does that still come into play anymore, where you're treated any differently because you're a female or African American?
All of the above. No. You know what? That is there were different experiences throughout my career. When I first started as a public defender, what was interesting was I was sitting at the trial table. We were doing a trial, and I wasn't second seating my senior colleague. I think I was actually representing one of the individuals as well. Bottom line, while there's a gentleman on the stand, and we're cross-examining him, he looks over to the table and references me as the cute lady sitting next to the defendant or attorney, something like that. But the point was, I'm like, really? Are we doing this gender thing even during cross-examination, you know? But more specifically, you know, there's always this, I don't know if it's intentional or is it unconscious bias, but, you know, when you walk into the room as a black female attorney, litigator, people try you, you know.
I'm sure they do. That's why I asked the question.
It doesn't happen often, but it happens where I see it, I notice it, and I'll either hold you accountable, correct you, or ask you to respectfully not to refer to whatever gender reference you're giving me outside of my name. Right, that's one. But I have to tell you, with the experience of the last 23 years of being a litigator, when I walk into the courtroom, the respect level is there, I have to say, and I appreciate because they know that when I'm walking into the courtroom, I'm not there to really play games with anybody. I'm there to represent my client as best as possible and to make sure that all the wheels of justice are appropriately oiled and moving forward. You understand? Because there's a lot of things that happen based on bias and unconscious bias conduct in any form, not just in the courtroom.
Correct.
In the boardroom, in the classroom. And I just want to be, if I have to be, and I'll continue to be, that person that will point it out to you or ask you to do it differently wherever necessary. So I'm not going to get into all the experiences that not just myself, but other people have experienced or shared with me as to being black, female, and all the biases that come with that in the eyes, depending on who's looking at you. There was something else I wanted to point out, but no, it'll come back. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, it's you know, I'm reading the book Cast by Isabel Wilkerson. And she tells a story of a father, because she's talking about the notion of, again, us not being considered human, so we could be called whatever they felt that we need to be called. We would not be called by certain names. You wouldn't be Mr. or Miss or Mrs. or whatever. You were always boy or girl or sweetie or honey or whatever. So he said this one man named his daughter intentionally Miss, M-I-S-S. That was her first name, was Miss.
But go ahead.
So anyhow, she's African-American young lady. She's in school. Principal was white, whatever, you know, comes at her for something that she didn't do or that was unjust or whatever. And he's calling and he's like, what is your name? And she says, Miss. My name is Miss. And he thought she was being funny. And so he asked her again, what is your name? And she says, my name is Miss, M-I-S-S. So he just could not believe it. Went and looked up the records, and sure enough, her name was Miss. He was livid that he was going to have to call her Miss, whatever her last name was. So the young lady goes home and tells her father the story, and he's elated. He's like, oh, the strategy worked. They were forced to call you Miss. And so even with things like that, in terms of, and I can remember, I had one of my principal assignments, and this was a black woman that said it, by the way. It wasn't a white woman. It was a black woman. So I'm standing out there, and a woman comes up to me and says, "Mr. Medley, can I see you for a minute?" I said, "Sure." She says, "I have to apologize." She starts laughing. I said, "What's going on?" So she says, "I have to apologize because I didn't realize," and at the time I was a vice principal, "I didn't realize you were the vice principal. I thought you were one of the big black security guards." Because in her frame...
That's you.
Right. That's all. At that particular school, that's all she knew black people to be. And so many times, you get folks that will, they think we're the waiter, or they think we're the this or that and the other, because they've already got in their mind. This is going back, coming full circle into education. Right. In terms of educating our folks, and to value education and to be able to apply it, and don't always assume. But again, going back to storytelling, why it's so important. This week we had our Superintendent's Institute, and we had two very powerful, inspirational speakers. But the speaker on Tuesday, his name was Lederick Horn, African American brother. Well-polished, well-spoken, but he tells his story. He was a special needs child. He was in special ed. He had a learning disability. Now, to listen to him talk, you would never know that was the whole upshot of the message, that we have to tell our story. The kids need to, because he talks about how he felt dumb and how, he come to the point of believing he was dumb because he was in special education, that when you're in SPED, you must be dumb. And he was far from it. But he told his story, and I'm thinking about that. And then we had another gentleman on Thursday who spoke with us. His stage name is Brian Heat. And again, he was not the special needs, but he told his story of how he got to where he got to. It is critical. It is important, to my point and to your point, of us sharing our stories. Now, it's interesting. I love the way you have inherent generational wealth. Talk to me a little bit about where did the books come from, the ideas, the titles. Talk to me because From Me to You is the first one?
From Me to You is the first one, yeah.
Okay, so where did the thought about, I love the way you worded it, like I said, inherent generational wealth.
Well, one, thank you for that. So, From Me to You, I can share with you how I was inspired by the book. I can share with you what the book layout might be. Not might be, but what it looks like. But the title itself, From Me to You, was inspired by my need and desire to speak to a very important question that my then 8-year-old son asked me back in September of 2019. We'll get to that in a quick second. That's the From Me to You. I needed to explain to him what, pretty much the who, what, when, where, how, and why of that complex topic of slavery. Because the question he asked was, "So, Mom, what's slavery really about?" But I'll get into that in a minute about the inspiration. So for me, the power of storytelling. Again, to hear other people's lived experiences will transform somebody's life. And if it just transforms one person's life, the job is done.
I know that's right.
But I know it will transform millions of people's lives who are willing to embrace how that person went through their journey or the lived experiences of our ancestors, et cetera, right? So for me, the power of storytelling and its inherent generational wealth. The generational wealth is the power is the wealth that comes from learning about who you are and what your life is worth. I mean, you can't put a price tag on your identity and self-worth and what the values and things that come from that. But let me go into, if I can, what inspired me to write the book, because I think that'll help to give a little bit more perspective of my journey, if I can. So what inspired me to write the book was back in September of 2019, our son, Justin, who was 8 years old at the time, he had occasion to go on a school trip to a nursing home here in New York called the Hebrew Home. At the nursing home, he had occasion to engage a Holocaust survivor. Now, the gentleman who's the Holocaust survivor shared with the group the branding on his arm, the stories about the Holocaust, his family's lived experiences, right? And it was on the way back to the school bus that my 8-year-old son and his 8-year-old peer, who happened to be a kid of Jewish descent, they started talking to each other, Mark, about the complex topic of slavery, about slavery and the Holocaust. And the fact that they made a connection somehow to have that conversation and to connect them was just really inspiring to me, right? Because, again, Mark, we have adults who don't talk about the Holocaust and slavery.
Correct.
And to see 8-year-olds or to hear 8-year-olds having that conversation, you can only be inspired and hopeful for our future, right? So anyway, later that evening, our son came to me as I'm getting him ready for bed, and he says, "So, Mom, what's slavery really about?" Oh, my goodness, Mark, I have to tell you, if I had on pearls, I would have popped them. If I was sitting on a stool, I would have fell over. But after I got myself together, I said, "Oh, son, I'm going to give you some more information. Just give me a chance. I want to make this a teachable moment for you and your peers," right? So, Mark, I started searching my resources. I looked at the books that I have, the library, speaking to other people, with no one really knowing why I'm broaching this subject, right? I was trying to figure out the best way to approach this. I was looking for something that would help me to narrate this story as sensitively or in a non-traumatic way and make the story accessible for our 8-year-old son, right? And I couldn't really find that one book that would narrate the story the way that I wanted it to be. So I remember the quote from Toni Morrison, and the quote reads, "If there's a book you want to read, but it hasn't been written yet, then you must write it." And remember, I couldn't find that book that was narrating the story of the complex topic of slavery
right.
The way that I wanted it narrated to my 8-year-old son. I didn't want something that had a lynching on every single page, a burning on every single page. We know what those things are and what they look like. And I didn't want to further traumatize him every time I exposed him to that. I wanted the book to be accessible. I wanted people to be able to grow into the book. And what I mean by that is I wanted the book to be sustainable. I wanted where it's multi-generational, first and foremost. It's well-suited for people of varying ages. I also say it's an African-American story, but with multicultural benefits. And what I'm getting to is that while my son is 8 years old, when he turns 18 years old, 28, 58, 68, I want him to pick up this book and he will walk away with a different perspective of it every single time. He'll learn something new every single time, okay? And I want it to be the frame of reference by which he holds on to and remembers his identity and self-worth, okay? So that's how the book was inspired and was published in June of 2022. Now, if I could just briefly go into the book's layout, that'll help with more perspective.
Yes, I want to give me the layout and talk a little bit about. I don't want you to give the whole thing because I want people to buy it, but give us I'm looking at the various chapters. I'm looking at the question, the journey, beginnings into the past. So you have to walk us through that. Yeah.
Okay. So I appreciate that. So it's one book written in 3 parts. I like to say the first part of the book, which is chapters 1 through 3, it speaks to diversity of people, which is illustrated in 2 ways, Mark. One, by connecting our sons to family and friends around the world, and because his father's from Haiti, and by 2, using one-page abstracts, right, from this thing called Country Spotlight. It's a Country Spotlight program where the parents and volunteers at my son's school come together, and we participate in spotlighting countries representative of the student body. So we'll spotlight the country's notable people, their books, the cuisines. We'll have special menu day where we cook, where they're prepared special menus for traditional meals. We have these 2 TV screens in 2 different buildings where we show slides about the country. So we really spotlight the country for a 30-day period, right? And the second part of the book, which is chapters 4 through 13, that covers what I think the historical moments. I like to say it really touches on the who, what, when, where, how, and why of that complex topic of slavery. I like to say also uninterrupted, right? And it speaks of the exploration, colonization, the revolution, down to the civil rights movement. And now in chapter 13 of that book, titled The Civil Rights Movement, that chapter features illustrations and short biographies of the most prominent 19th and 20th century civil rights activists, centering their voices with quotes and affirmations that are painted in the time in which they lived, right? Starting with Ida B. Wells and ending with former President Barack Obama, right? Then the third part of the book, chapters 14 and 15, that's where the book transitions. And it transitions with an empowering poem by Ralph Waldo Emerson. And that poem is titled, Be Not the Slave of Your Own Past. And what that poem, to me, essentially means is, think of yourself on a beach and you see a buoy, buoy out in the waters. You're going to swim to that buoy, but while you're on that journey, you're going to reflect and learn about your history, identify your culture, and on the way back inland, you're going to come back renewed, okay, with the full, with embracing all of who you are and knowing what your life is worth, right? But also in that last part of the book, there are positive affirmations. There are also illustrations and quotes from some phenomenal people with phenomenal stories who back in September 19th through, I think it was like April of 2020, they shared their personal journeys and special messages with our youth from grades, the pre-K grade through fifth grade. Let me just say this last thing about the book layout. The last part of the book, I had an opportunity back in 2018 to 2020, I believe it was, to serve as the chair of the Parents of Color Committee at my son's school. And I created this concept called Phenomenal People with Phenomenal Stories. And the goal was to have, much like you do in your school, bring people to the school, professionals to the school, so that they can talk to our children and share their lived experiences as to how they became the Edgewood Dr. Tot, the acclaimed writer and author who came in and spoke to our third graders, the Dr. Onika Williams, the urologic surgeon out of Boston, and the acclaimed and award-winning author herself of 8 children's books. That's Dr. Onika Williams. Or whether it's Dr. Pamela C.D. Jolly, who I refer to as an international speaker, or whether it's the legendary Calvin Hill, who happens to be an alum at the school. He came actually in April of 2023, because in 2020 COVID hit, so we were able to put it off, but we just had a presentation of him in on May 15th of 2023. So the point is, they all allowed me to illustrate them in the book, and they each provided a quote that they will share with their children, and it's all reflected in that last chapter of the book. So that's the layout and what inspired me to write the book.
Well, I tell you what, I have the book, and it looks, on the one hand, it looks like a children's book, but it's so much information for adults as well. Like, it would grab my attention. I would read it in terms of, even though it looks like a, because the illustrations are great. I love the illustrations. And it's for people that look like us, and I love like the continents of the world. I like the way you have the colorful layout of it, because I have not memorized all 7 of them, but I think looking at this, I probably could. The North America, Europe, Asia, Africa, South America, Australia, and Antarctica. And so, yeah, that, I mean, it's chocked full of information. Even though it may appear to be a children's book, it's not.
And you know what, Mark? That goes to the sustainability of the book, as I said before. It's multi-generational, appropriate for many ages. So my intentions was to, one, in a sense, pad the front of the book, pad the back of the book, which is the third part of the book, and then keep that center part of the book, that middle part, to speak to the who, what, when, where, how, and why of the complex topic of slavery uninterrupted. Okay, and the goal was to have, you can have children sit with the parents or the guardian and go through the first 2 chapters, diversity and multiculturalism and things like that. The kid can even read that part. And then you have the adult who will either pick sections of that middle part and talk to the child and explain things to the kid. And over time, you can, touch on them, differently. Okay, but the point is, you can allow kids to read the first part, read the second part, but then that middle part requires engagement with an adult or guardian. And I hope that the adult will read some parts of the middle of the book and then explain or find a way to explain further to the child particular sections, or even over time. Like our son, he's 8, and he's now 12. Oh my God, he's 11 and a half. He'll be 12 in September. Oh my goodness. So anyway, I'm hoping that when he picks it up at the age of 12 or picks it up at the age of 22, he's going to learn something new with every opportunity to pick this book up and read it.
Well, so it is a wonderful resource because it's almost encyclopedic. It's almost, because I'm sitting here looking at the map of Africa and how you have it labeled. And I know I've done some work in terms of my ancestry. I know on my mother's side, her dominance is Cameroon. On my father's side is Guinea-Bissau. And I'm looking here at the map, and you have all that listed. I see Guinea-Bissau listed under the Guinea area. You know, you had the lines for each area. See Ghana, Equatorial Guinea, Republic of the Congo. I mean, like I said, you have this combination, this nice combination of like the pages that have one or two lines on it. That's the part that makes it look like a kid's book. But then, like you said, you got the pages that really go deep.
It's about engaging. You sit there and you're engaging with your child, and you get to pick what section you want to digest yourself, and then translate it to communicating with your kid at some point. You know, the kid might have a school project, and you'll go into that middle section and pick out something about the transatlantic slave trade, you know, and you'll learn about it. And then you can engage your child as your child is preparing that school project or the transatlantic slave trade. That's one thing. But in the book also, Mark, is this thing called, and I love doing this part, the did you know, right?
Right.
So while I don't have a picture of, the continent of Africa and all the, a world, I guess I do have a world map in there. But when I do presentations, I have this picture, and I've narrated it in the book, where you see the African diaspora, right? And it's a picture of Africa with all these red lines going. It looks like it's you're exporting things out of the country, and you're exporting human beings. It shows the Atlantic slave trade route, the Portuguese slave trade route, the Arab slave trade to Asia route, and it shows the Arab trans-Saharan slave trade. And what that means, and as I narrated it, you get to see how from the 1500s through the 1900s, how there was a global slave trade that happened simultaneously. You understand? And don't forget, in the book also, it speaks to how slave trades go back to at least like the 700s.
Correct.
You know, with the Arab trans-Saharan slave trade as well. But the point is that it shows how during the Arab trans-Saharan slave trade, there were movements extricating Africans from the mid-Saharan area of the continent up to the Mediterranean Sea and dispersing them throughout different parts of Europe. You have the Arab slave trade to Asia. That's pretty much where the slave trade was in both on the east coast of Africa, right? And then you have the Portuguese slave trade down during the southern part, taking them to Central America and other locations. And then you have the infamous, of course, Atlantic slave trade. You know, so I just love that did you know component that I put in the book, because it gives additional information that people sometimes don't know about. You know, just wanted to share it.
No, absolutely. And again, every morning at my school we have what we call morning meeting. Mm-hmm. And I am certainly going to use this book. I'm going to read to my students out of it, as well as ask some of the questions and give some of the affirmations. So I can tell you now, this school year, I will be using it with my students. And in terms of leaders of the civil rights, that one is not released yet, or is it about to be released? Or has it been released?
Well, both. The leaders of the civil rights movement, a brief introduction featuring phenomenal people with phenomenal stories, along with the civil rights movement, a coloring and activity book featuring phenomenal people with phenomenal stories. Those are both due to be released October 3rd.
Okay, so they're upcoming.
Yeah, they're definitely coming. And if I can, I'll just share with you, briefly, that it was in 2018 or 2019 that the Library of Congress created a select list of, images of the 20th century African-American activists, right? And there were too many of those images of the notable African-Americans that I felt that a lot of our younger kids don't know about, don't really hold on to long enough to really appreciate the lived experiences of them. And I just wanted to compile it and make a moment for our kids. So what I did was I created the coloring and activity book. And in the coloring book, you're going to have images, illustrations of the 20th century African-American activists. You're going to have short bios of them. You're going to have, there's word searches for each one of the individuals titled, Who Am I? And you get to do a word search puzzle, dedication to my grandmother, because she loved doing word searches. So it's another way to educate our kids about their history and the lived experiences of some prominent, phenomenal people. So it comes out October 3rd. So thank you for that.
No, and you know what? Let me tell you why this is so important. Now, I'm going to tell you now, I say it all the time, and folks who know me, they know. I mean, if you come to my office, there's Martin Luther King all over the place. I mean, it's just, just Martin is all over the place. However, and I'm probably president or one of the presidents of the Martin Luther King Jr. fan club. However, unfortunately, he's usually the only person our kids know. Him and Rosa Parks. They're it. I mean, it's like when you start talking Black history, the first thing kids say is Martin Luther King. First thing kids say is Rosa Parks. But there are so many others. I mean, what folks don't know, or many folks don't know, is when Martin Luther King was doing the I Have a Dream speech, when he really kicked into gear near the end, that's because Mahalia Jackson or Ella Baker or one of them, whoever was sitting behind him, was like, tell him about the dream, doctor. And he heard that, and that's when he went into the ending part of that speech. But there were so many others who contributed. I mean, like you had the Ella Bakers that you don't hear about. Adam Clayton Powell Jr. is one of my heroes as well. I had to do a paper for school, and we had to pick an autobiography to analyze their leadership style. So I said, as soon as the professor gave the instruction, as soon as he gave the assignment, I said, I know exactly who I'm going to write about, because I had a book on Adam Clayton Powell Jr. But they played just as important roles, but you rarely hear about them. And so a book like yours, and I'm looking right here at the cover of it. I mean, I'm looking at Ida B. Wells. I'm looking at Lewis, Medgar Evers. I'm trying to name them right off my head. Thurgood Marshall. Right off I see W.E.B. Du Bois. I see Marcus Garvey. I see, like I said, I'm looking at your cover of your books. I'm trying to list them all off without having to look at their names. But Malcolm X, Shirley Chisholm.
It's not, you know what, we can't name everyone. The point and goal is to let our kids know, or the younger generations know, that there is a place they can turn to.
Yes.
Whether it's doing their history, doing research, or whether it is us as adults bringing and presenting people of varying backgrounds and professions to them. And the goal is for them to hear the lived experiences of other people and draw down from those experiences that which can encourage or empower our younger generations to want to keep moving forward and understanding who they are and what their lives are truly worth.
Absolutely. I mean, the color, I love the cover of this because it's very simple. It's black and white. And it's surrounded by all these folks that I was naming, Thurgood Marshall. I'm just going around the square, but I love the cover. And again, if I put this in front of, the average child, they would not know these folks. And that's the whole point of it. You need to understand who these folks were and their contribution. I see Maya Angelou. Every time I look at it, another name pops in there. Barbara Jordan, Mary McLeod Bethune. I'm seeing all of these folks, and they're like popping into, because see, I know them, you know them. We need more people to know who they are in their country. And going back to my original statement, I do believe if folks understand their history, there's just some things they would not do and they would not say.
Right. You know what was great, what made me proud is when my son had a project he just finished 6th grade, and he had to write about, I think it was W.E.B. Du Bois. And he didn't select W.E.B. Du Bois originally. His friend had it, so he asked his friend to switch with him. And so my son wound up with W.E.B. Du Bois. And my son came home, and he went to the coffee table, and he picked up leaders of the civil rights movement and used it as an opening source, a starting point for which he needed to do research on W.E.B. Du Bois. And he turned to it, and he just started reading. And then he went to his other resources that are available, of course, and he pulled together whatever he needed to do regarding W.E.B. Du Bois. And of course, there are a lot of resources out there. I'm just hoping that my book will serve as a tool, as an additional resource to help remind our children that they have a frame of reference from which to draw down from when learning about the lived experiences of our ancestors. So I just felt really good to know and see him go right to the coffee table and pick up the book.
I know that's right. Because for me, just looking at this book, I stand on all these folks' shoulders. Had there not been for them, I wouldn't be in the principal seat. I wouldn't be sitting behind this microphone. Had it not been for these folks. So whenever I see a picture like this, I revere these folks, because had it not been for their work and their sacrifices and everything, exactly.
As an attorney, we wouldn't be here as a radio host.
Right.
One teacher, all the things that you did, And the other thing too is, Mark, I like to point out to people, this is not new. Us being the professionals that we are in the professions that we are standing in, because we had Black Wall Street.
Right.
Those other things, So I try to tell our younger generation, this is not new. Where you want to be an NBA player or lawyer, doctor, teacher, whatever. We are fully capable of doing these things. All we have to do, Mark, is remind our kids of the fact that who they are is enough. But there's a lot of work that we need to do with respect to, learning about their own abilities and trusting in their abilities, notwithstanding what others may try to impose upon them. So, but anyway, I digress again.
Not at all. It's all pertinent. It's all relevant. Matter of fact, I am going to invite you back and have you back. I have to definitely text Pam and let her know she did it again. She provided me with another wonderful guest. I tell people this all the time whenever I get a guest from either Pam or Nikki. Pam Perry and Nikki Wood, those two have carte blanche with me. Anybody they send me is automatically on. It's just a matter of, okay, what date they want. Because they send me the best people.
I appreciate that, because Dr. Pam Perry of Speakers Magazine,
yes,
that woman is a phenomenal publicist. And I say that because, guess what, Mark? She's been doing things for me, publicist-wise. I haven't even retained her as such. She's just sharing of her knowledge, sharing of her platform. She is the reason why, thank you, Lord, I recently, on August 4th of 2023, received the prestigious award from the National Association of Black Journalists. And I tell you, it was an event, a convention down in Birmingham, Alabama. And oh my God, Black excellence on display. I was so honored to be a part of that program. And it's all because of, and thank you to Dr. Pam Perry, who connected me to the National Association of Black Journalists. So kudos to Dr. Dorothy Tucker, the recent former president of the organization. I was also interviewed by the incredible Randall Pinkston, former CBS anchor, and currently Morgan State University professor. And I just have to tell you, it was an incredible time, and I was so grateful to have been a part of the Authors Showcase, in which I received that prestigious award. So I just want to say thank you to Dr. Pam Perry, thank you to Dorothy Tucker, and the many other people who I had occasion to engage with and meet and hear their lived experiences, whether it was Jamel Hill, whether it was Michelle Miller, who wrote the book Belonging,
right?
Whether it was Randall Pinkston. It was just an incredible time, and I just wanted to say thank you.
I know. Well, I've been trying to get Michelle Miller. I've been trying to get her on the show as well. That's been a little bit hard, but I'm going to keep trying. But in any event...
When I speak to her tomorrow, I'm going to let her know.
Oh, well, please do. And tell her if she sees something from Marc Medley or the Reading Circle or whatever, tell her, you were on or what have you. But in any event, we're kind of at the point now, and we just started doing it where I am, and that is I turn off the microphone and I allow you to promote beyond what we've already done. The only thing you can't say is a dollar amount, but anything short of a dollar amount in terms of contact information, book releases, book signings, how to get the book, or anything you want to do, or anybody you want to shout out, I'm going to turn the mic off and allow you to do that. But like I was saying a couple of minutes ago when we started this conversation, going down that road about Dr. Pam, those two, Dr. Pam Perry and Nikki Wood, those two, when they called me up, because Pam had called me or texted me or something and said, did you and Deidra Moore hook up yet? And I said, you know what? The name sounds familiar. I think we did, but we never did settle on a date. And that's whenever I actually, we called each other and actually talked. But that's what had jumped that or inspired that call, because she actually said, did you and Deidra hook up yet?
I love it.
And so their guests, there's not one, either one of those two ladies have sent me that has been one that I've said, ooh, I shouldn't have interviewed that one. No, they've been every last one they send. When I talk about stellar reputation, those two have it. And when they call me up, whoever their person is that they're recommending, they are on. It's just a matter of what Saturday morning they want. But at this point, I'm going to turn the mic off. You get the chance to promote. Like I said, anything other than a dollar amount, the mic is yours. I'm going to shut down and you're on, and then we're out.
All right.
It's on you.
Okay. Marc Medley, thank you so much for having me on your platform. Thank you for allowing me to dig a little deeper into the book, or the essence of my book, titled From Me to You, The Power of Storytelling and Its Inherent Generational Wealth. An African-American story, but like I say, it's with multicultural benefits. You can find From Me to You on my website, which is www.deidramore.com. That's DEIDRAMOORE.com. You can find me on Facebook under the business section titled DMJ-Voice, VOICE, identity and purpose. So that's DMJ-Voice, identity and purpose on Facebook. You can find me on Twitter at Deidra Moore 2253. You can find me on Instagram at DMoore2253. That's DMOORE 2253. But most often you'll find me on LinkedIn under Deidra Moore-Janvier. And that's DEIDRAMOORE-JAN as in Nancy, V as in Victor, IER. And I'd also like to shout out Michelle Garcia of Mascot Publishing, and all the incredible people who make up teams of people who were instrumental in helping to get out From Me to You, to get out the leaders of the civil rights movement, as well as the civil rights movement, A Coloring and Activity book. So again, Mark, you can find the book in Amazon, Target, Barnes & Noble, Ingram & Baker. There's a host of places, apparently, that I'm told, the Lit Bar, that you can find the book in. It's now in the New York Public Library. It's in the Library of Congress. It's also in the, what they call the CLAMS, CLAMS, which stands for Tape Libraries Automated Materials Sharing System, down in Martha's Vineyard. That's where there's 35-member libraries, of course, Cape Cod, Martha's Vineyard, and then Puckett, that has recently registered the book in their system. So again, thank you so very much, Marc Medley, for embracing me, my book, and my mission. All right?
Well, I thank you for joining me this morning, rising early, and see, you brought just as much energy this time of morning as you did whenever we first talked. So no need to be concerned. It was wonderful. I will get the links out to you, and when they come to you, you are free to do whatever you would like with them. One last footnote before we go. We referenced them. I'm going to give you their name. Both of them were named Justin. It was Justin Jones and Justin Pearson. Those are the two brothers who was restated back into the house after they were ousted. So we referenced those, and I wanted to make sure everybody that we referenced that we named. But again, thank you so much. I will definitely be in touch. And like I said, I will get the links back out to you, and you're free to do whatever you'd like with them.
I appreciate you, Marc Medley.
Same here. All right. We will be in touch. Take care.
Okay.
All right. Bye now.